So, what happens when Seth Trimble comes back?
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Carolina content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Really appreciate you making this your first listen or watch of the day. And I want to send a special shout out to the everydayers, all our great Locked On Tar Heels Discord members, and our Locked On Tar Heels insiders. Let's get right after it. This episode's brought to you by Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Coming up on the show today, man, this has been the question that has been thrown at me all weekend long from every angle, from people all over the place. What on earth, Isaac, is going to happen when Seth Trimble eventually comes back to play for North Carolina? And, by the way, when is that going to be? How should Carolina roll? What should they do? What should the starting lineup be? What should there? All of those questions. People are all up in arms trying to figure it out. And there are a multitude of answers, and it's so fun. So that's the conversation we're having today. But of course, we got to preview the SMU game because that's tonight. Carolina hosting the Mustangs for the first time ever. That'll include our Four Corners preview. We're going to have to burn through that one. It's going to be an offensive battle. And so we're going to try to motor ahead quickly, just like the Tar Heels will do tonight in the Smith Center. Let's go. Here it is. What to do when Seth Trimble is back? That is the question from the entirety of Carolina fandom right now. Here's my biggest take off the top. I'm going to tip my thoughts on it, but then I want to back up and explain my thinking. An unconventional roster means you've got to operate in unconventional ways. Maybe you could say it a different way. An unconventional roster means you have to play unconventionally. Often, think about this. When people just toe the line of the status quo, it does nothing. You just fall in line with what everyone else is doing. Think about this with me for a second. Often the biggest breakthroughs in sports happen when a coach, somebody, a player, a GM, whatever it is willing to think and operate outside the box of the status quo. Think about Steve Kerr and the Warriors with Steph and Clay and Draymond. Why did they become crazy and annihilate the rest of the NBA? Because they were willing to do something different that worked for them. Think about West Coast offense in football, man. That has revolutionized the way this game is played today. Think about the A's and Moneyball in baseball. Like, hey, we don't have the money to keep up with the Yankees and the Mets and, LA. But what if we looked at numbers and utilized just little things beneath the radar that nobody else is paying attention to? A's go on a run, make the playoffs. That's what Carolina has to do with this team and this roster. So, what to do when Seth Trimble comes back? I want to unpack what this means for me to think about being unconventional with an unconventional roster. Let's go back, take this a couple steps at a time. First off, before we can answer what to do when Seth comes back, there's also the overlying question of when is that going to be? When will Seth Trimble come back? On the weekly ACC call, coach's call on Monday, Coach Davis said this. This is a direct quote. He being Seth Trimble, he practiced yesterday, meaning Sunday, did one full contact drill, but I haven't spoken with him today, and we have practice at 3, so I'll have more of an update after practice today, but he did practice yesterday, again, meaning Sunday. Obviously, there's not another media availability with Coach Davis after that, and he's not going to get on social media and be like, hey, I spoke with Seth Trimble after practice today, he's in, right? Like, we're not going to get that from him, but the news of Seth practicing on Sunday and being in a full contact drill, and he didn't elaborate on how much he practiced outside of that, and his wording was a little unclear there, but it's at least encouraging to know that Seth is taking steps back in the direction of playing. So then, I think we could look for him to maybe make an appearance tonight. I don't know if he'll play or be on a minutes restriction or what, but that's a reality. So then, thinking about how do you operate, what personnel do you use, all of that. Let's go back and remind ourselves that ahead of this 3-game Seth Trimble absence, which has been Campbell, Louisville, and Notre Dame, The necessity to move Ian Jackson into the starting lineup was growing more obvious by the day. I legit, because Ian had that second 20-point game against UCLA in the CBS Sports Classic. And so heading into that Campbell game 8 days later, I legitimately thought we would see some kind of starting lineup change or Ian coming in even earlier for the Campbell game. But the uncertainty was who he would be coming in for. And that answer was made more easy because of Seth's injury. It's like, well, yeah, Seth's not playing. Let's just insert Ian basically into the 3 slot. So that factor made that decision easy and obvious for the coaching staff. But now Ian, with his performance in the 3-game absence of Seth, has forced Coach Davis's hand. You simply cannot put this young man back on the bench because Carolina's defense has not shown themselves capable of operating at a high enough level. What does that mean then? All right, our offense is great. So let's just go, set the world on fire with it and just score as much as we can. That means Ian Jackson has to start. So then the big question is, if Ian has forced the coaching staff's hand, which I believe they do, I would imagine you do as well, when Seth is back, whether that's tonight, whether that's Saturday at NC State, what do you do? Again, let's go back to our refrain of this episode. Say it with me. An unconventional roster means you have to operate unconventionally. So here's how the question was given to me, like from my buddy Brandon Mayberry, who often reaches out on Twitter. We have some great conversations. He says this: Isaac, do you think when Seth comes back, they should just start the best 5 regardless of position? Just be quick and disruptive on defense, and this puts our best offensive weapons on the court at the same time. So this idea of starting the best 5 regardless of position, for me, the problem is that I think that is definitely an option. But if you do so, the best 5 players, the best 5 offensive players, maybe even at least we should say, are all 6'6" or under. RJ Davis, 6 foot. Elliot, 6'1". Seth, 6'3", Ian, 6'4", and Drake Powell at 6'6". So when we think about this conversation with Carolina about what do you do, there's multiple problems, and it all revolves around roster construction. Because it's almost like when you start thinking about a first team all ACC or a first team all America. With that, you could put 5 guards or 5 bigs, and it wouldn't matter because they don't have to go out and play a basketball game. But with this, it's difficult when your 5 best players are all guards or wings, because you can't just necessarily go out and do that. So a big part of the problem is just simply Carolina's roster construction, which we knew from this summer with Carolina's lack of having a quality at the level of quality it needs to be big. So here are the conversations with the roster construction issues. The best 5 players leaves you with everyone being 6'6" or shorter. Another problem with the roster construction is Cade Tyson just simply hasn't panned out as we thought he would. If you didn't think he was going to hit, congrats to you, you got it right, but that stinks because they're not good. The other thing is Carolina just doesn't have enough shooting. If you have those 5, maybe you do, but it's hard to look at that. And then thus far, no front court player has been reliable enough or consistent enough to be like, this is going to be the dude game after game after game. And so all of this roster construction issue factors into this conversation about what you do when Seth comes back. So less obvious to me is trying to figure out what to do when Seth is ready to go, hopefully tonight. You've got those 5 we just talked about: Elliot, RJ, Seth, Ian, and Drake. There are 3 other players who have started a game this season, both Jae'lyn's, Washington and Withers, and Van Allen Lubin. 8 total players have started a game. So, so I'm just talking specifically about starting 5 right now. So the way I would want to handle that is you look at that pool of 8, and it's like, is there anybody else you would bring into that? I don't think I would. I wouldn't think about Ty Claude. I wouldn't think about Cade Tyson. I wouldn't think about James Brown. So I would rule those 3 out. So of the 8 that have started a game, is there anyone you can rule out to narrow this down? I personally would rule out Jalen Withers. I don't think he should be in the starting lineup. And then the other one that I actually advocated for, because I at least wanted to see it, is Van Allen Lubin. I thought it would make a difference with him as the starting 5. And I just don't think it made as big a difference as I hoped it would with him coming into the starting lineup. And so you've seen it now. The coaching staff has gone back to Jalen Washington, and I think that's correct. I would lean away from Van Allen Lubin as well as a starter. So then, if those 2 guys are out, that narrows the pool down to 6 different players that I would consider for the starting lineup with Seth back. These 5 guards and wings we just talked about, and Jalen Washington. So here's how I would approach trying to think about this. And then the next segment, we'll get to the answer of what would I ultimately do. How I want to approach it right now is, what are you missing if player X is not in your starting lineup? If player X is the odd man out. With Elliott Cadeau, you lose your best playmaker, you lose your best vision on the floor, you lose your best distributor, whatever you want to say with that. And maybe one of your, not the quickest, but one of the quickest with the ball at getting to the rim. If it's RJ Davis, you lose your veteran who, while he might not be shooting what he should be from 3 right now, is still the team's leading scorer. He's first in free throw percentage, free throw attempts. He's second on the team in assists per game, second on the team in steals per game, 5th in rebounding at 6'1". That's wild. And so RJ just brings all of that, and that's what you lose if he's not in the starting lineup. Seth Trimble, you lose arguably your best defender and most athletic player. You saw how critical his defensive absence was, both against Louisville and Notre Dame, as Chucky Hepburn and Marcus Burton basically just had their way with Carolina in these past 2 games. The Tar Heels had no defensive answers for those 2 guys. If you take Drake Powell, if he's the odd man out, you lose Mr. Do-It-All. You lose his size, his length, his athleticism, his attacking that we've seen more of lately, his willingness to let it fly when necessary. Like that 3 he hit late against Notre Dame was so critical. You lose just his smoothness and the way he glides and gets up and gets it's wild. If it's Ian Jackson, you lose who is your most dynamic offensive player and one who has more size than Elliot, RJ, or Seth. This freshman, yes, he's a freshman, but he literally just did something that has not been done by a Tar Heel freshman since Tyler Hansbrough. He's, I know that he's the second leading scorer to RJ, but if you look at it more analytically driven, not just points per game, but if you look at it per 40 minutes and per 100 possessions, which kind of takes tempo out of it and looks at it at a bigger picture level, he's the leading scorer for Carolina in those regards. And check this out. Ian Jackson leads the ACC, not just Carolina, the ACC in effective field goal percentage. That's what you're losing if you take him out. And if it's Jalen Washington you take out, you lose size. You lose your big with the best, what I think is the highest ceiling of any of the bigs. You lose someone who seems to be finding his stride, right? Like I feel like I've seen some definite steps forward from Jalen Washington just in these past 2 games. Someone who's really starting to find his niche. Yes, he hasn't hit a 3 this year. He's not taken many of them, but you lose your best shooting big. I still think those 3s are coming from him. He hasn't taken advantage of that yet. So all of these guys, there are things that if they're the odd man out of this 6 when Seth returns, you lose something. So what is it that you can live without? That's what you got to figure out. So all of that said, what would I ultimately do? Who's in my starting 5? We'll answer that in just a second. Right after I tell you about Game Time, attending the new 12-team college football playoff is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before, man. I love any of these big-time environments, like thinking back to the Final Four in New Orleans a couple years ago where Carolina beat Duke, man. Those kind of crazy experiences, and I can't wait to make new memories like that. And the app that's here to help you do it is Game Time. They've got a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite events even easier. What Picks does is it filters out the fluff to only allow you to see just the very best deals on the best seats so you don't have to waste your time with everything else. Recently, I literally used Game Time to find tickets for my family to go see Dude Perfect's tour that's upcoming this summer, man. It was a great Christmas gift. I was so thankful for Game Time. How about this game tonight against SMU? You can find tickets in the upper deck for single digits, or there's a great set of 4 seats in a row, 3rd row up, row C in the upper deck, man. It's a great vantage point for just $23 each. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, I've laid out my arguments. I've laid out some rationale and some other thinking. And so the question then is, as Seth comes back, what would I ultimately do? I know your answer might be very different because I've heard all sorts of different answers from people. You bench Elliot. You bench RJ. He's not shooting well. You bench Seth. Just let him come off the bench and factor in. Jalen Washington. Keep him like. I have heard arguments for all 6 of these dudes that we're wrestling with to be the one coming off the bench. I love it, man. I love this kind of discourse amongst the Carolina fan base. But here's me. As I build this lineup, and right now I'm thinking starting lineup, I want to ask the question like the reverse of what we just did. Who is your cornerstone? Who's the building block? You know, when people say that question of like, if you were starting an NBA franchise right now, what player would you go with? Like, that's the question I want to ask. Who is your starting point that absolutely cannot be the player that goes to the bench? And you know what? I didn't think I'd be saying this until I started putting this together. The answer for me is I'm starting with Ian Jackson because right now he is the most dynamic offensive player Carolina has. Yes, he's got things to grow in defensively, but he is working on it. There have been some good defensive plays, but what he brings offensively, his ability to make shots, his efficiency with it, he's shooting 40% from 3 right now. And his lack of conscience, man, he's just going to keep doing it. He doesn't hesitate like a lot of his teammates do when he's got a shot. He knows he needs to take it. I am starting with Ian Jackson. There's no world in which he's the one going to the bench. That's my starting point. Second, RJ Davis. Yes, the 3-point shooting is down, as we said a little bit ago, but there's too much of everything else that he's contributing, including his expertise and experience, including also like his even-keeled demeanor, which kind of offsets Elliott's emotionability that he often brings to the table. I have RJ Davis as the second player to build on. Third, Seth. Man, as soon as he's back and ready, he's got to be back in the starting lineup. Like what he has added this year, in addition to his already great defense and athleticism, is he's grown in his steals per game. When he went out with his injury, he was Carolina's leading rebounder, not to mention, top 3 in scoring for the Tar Heels. There's too much dynamic playmaking he does on both ends of the floor. I'm not bringing that off the bench. So definitely Ian, definitely RJ, definitely Seth, excuse me. After that, yes, RJ's playmaking is the best of his career, but I'm still assuming that his shooting is going to come back around at some point. And it's going to be difficult for him to be able to facilitate at the level Carolina would need him to, while also being an ACC Player of the Year level shooting guard. That said, I need Elliott Cadeau in this lineup. Critical caveat, he's got to be balanced emotionally, got to be ready to go in that way. That's part of why you need RJ's experience to keep him in line and keep him in check. But I think when you have this foursome of RJ, Ian, and Seth, that's so dynamic. And if you can free them up and just let Elliot play make for them, come on, man, what are we talking about? Give me that. And then fifth, and this is where maybe the drama comes in because it's the last spot, Drake or Jalen Washington. For me, I want DP. Give me Drake. I've already laid out what he brings, a little bit of a renaissance man, jack of all trades. But he is one of your top 2 NBA prospects on this team, bringing an NBA body, NBA athleticism. He just glides. He's so smooth when he raises up it's crazy. He's been attacking more. He's finding his own niche on this team to be very dynamic. He has had a great 4-game stretch coinciding with what Ian has been doing, and I just don't see how you take that off. So I believe that these 5, yes, it's short, but it is your most dynamic offensive lineup. It's an unconventional lineup. Yeah, but you remember what? An unconventional roster means you got to operate in unconventional ways. These are your 5 leading scorers for this team, so just roll with it. Let's see what happens. And let's acknowledge it's a lineup you have to use in spurts, maybe 2 minutes at a time and get somebody else in. Because with unconventionality, it's not just about personnel, it's also about scheme. I still think there's more schematic things that Carolina could outside the box try to help get better, right? Like with being 6'6" as your tallest with this lineup, you are giving up a lot. Like SMU's center is 7'2" tonight. And so you've got to do other things defensively to get outside the box. I think the coaching staff hasn't fully leaned into that yet, and I'd like to see them do so with traps or other zone looks or whatever it is, just fronting the post, whatever you need to do to try to allow your strengths to stand out. Make them adjust to you, not vice versa. And of course, keep in mind, I'm just talking starting five here. Clearly, Carolina is still going to need major contributions from the Jae'lyns, specifically Jalen Washington, but you need the good version of Jalen Withers to be athletic, not trying to handle the ball, not doing any of that stuff. Then Allen Lubin, Ty Claude getting in there, getting rebounds and putbacks. Cade Tyson is going to have to hit some threes. James Brown is going to offer some good energy minutes here and there. So you need all these guys, but man, I just think this is your best five. You're already only 9-6. Just rock with it and see what happens. Now, the pushback that some are going to give, and I hear it, is what about a lineup, though, Isaac, where you do keep a big and four others? What would you do then? Great question. So let's start there. If you do have to keep a big, for me, I think most people would say, all right, then I'm, of those five you just named, I feel like the thing I've heard the most is send Elliot to the bench and give me Jalen Washington. So if I'm going to have a big, for me, it would be Jalen Washington, who, by the way, like I just said, SMU has some big dudes. He's going to be critical tonight, as will the rest of the bigs, because SMUs are going to factor in a big way. I need Jalen Washington to keep building on the steps he's been taking the last couple games, those 5 blocks against Notre Dame, who's a bit undersized themselves. So sure, you might not get that tonight, but and that, like, he's going to hit from 3. Let's see that tonight. J-Wash, get outside, draw them out with you, and open up driving lanes for the guards. Well, so if we're going to have a big, it's J-Wash for me. As I said a second ago, after that, I'm building with the 3 just most dynamic guys. And for me, that's Ian, RJ, Seth in that order, along with J-Wash. So that's 4. And that means the odd man out for me comes down in this lineup to either Elliot or Drake. And ultimately, I know a lot of people out there have said, man, I'm putting Elliot on the bench, letting RJ run the point. You can do that at times, and Carolina obviously is going to. But for the ideal lineup for me, Carolina just simply operates less efficiently when Elliott Cadeau is on the bench. So I would, in this lineup with a big, I would actually keep him, and it would be Drake Powell I'd bring off the bench. And I don't like that, but that's what I personally would do. Bring him. He's the first one off the bench in this scenario for me. Just too many things that he does so well to keep him on the bench long. But that's how I would go. If you're saying, Isaac, you got to keep a big, who are the other 4? Elliot, RJ, Ian, and Seth. That's what I'm rocking with. All right. Give me all your pushback. Let me hear why I'm wrong and why you would do different things. I love this conversation. You're not going to offend me or make me upset. I love it. I invite it. Let's talk about it more. Come join us in the Discord or Locked on Tar Heels Insiders, where you and I can just text back and forth about it. Now, all of this conversation we've just had about playing unconventionally with an unconventional roster when Seth comes back, we'll see how this could play out tonight as Carolina hosts SMU for a late 9 p.m. Eastern tip. Get ready for SMU, including the Four Corners preview, coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are just simply better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 bet. Man, I love it. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need, from live bets to same-game parlays, so much more. We do have the line already for this game tonight. Carolina favored by 7.5 over the Mustangs. So come check it all out at FanDuel.com and get started with $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's get into this SMU preview. We're going to have to go warp speed just like the way Carolina likes to play, so it is appropriate. Carolina hosting SMU for the first time with the Mustangs now in the ACC tonight. 9 p.m. ACC Network at FanDuel. Carolina's favored by 7.5. At Ken Palm, the line is Tar Heels by 6. These teams have played 3 times before. Carolina has won 2 of them. It was interesting. 3 straight years, 85, 86, and 87. It's funny. SMU's coach is Andy Enfield in his first season. I say it's funny because you may or may not remember that it was his hiring that was part of what kicked off the whole crazy coaching carousel last season. Let me quickly run you through it. SMU's head coach was Rob Lanier in his second year. They canned him as they prepared to move to the ACC. I guess they thought he wasn't the dude. Instead, SMU takes Andy Enfield away from USC. Eric Musselman from Arkansas goes to USC to replace him. You know where we're getting to now. Coach Powell comes to Arkansas from Kentucky to replace Eric Musselman. Mark Pope leaves BYU to go to Kentucky, and then Kevin Young was on the Phoenix Suns staff, leaves that to come coach BYU. That's the whole coaching carousel, and it all started because of our new ACC brethren. You may or may not have realized that. I love it. I think it's hilarious. SMU, not ranked in the AP poll. They were picked 13th in the ACC preseason. I think they are going to blow that out of the water. Right now, they are 41st in the net, just actually ahead of Carolina. The Tar Heels right now are 43rd. That makes this a quad 2 game when you're at home. Quad 2 is 31-75. Speaking of which, in the quads, I forgot to mention on yesterday's show that Dayton lost over the weekend, and so they fell to 54th, pumping them from a quad 1 game to quad 2. So now Carolina is just 1-6 in quad 1. Now, obviously, if they keep winning, they could jump right back up, but there's that. SMU 51st at KenPom. Listen to this discrepancy. 22nd in offensive efficiency, 108th in defensive. Comparatively, Carolina is 26th and 58th. Results thus far for SMU on the season. Good grief, I can't clear my throat. There we go. On the season, SMU is 11-3. Their best wins in non-con were over LSU and Washington State. Just kind of they're ranked in the 60s at KenPom. Their ACC wins, they've got 2 of them, are over Virginia at home and at Boston College. Their 2 losses in non-con play were at Butler, who's not great, and then at home to Mississippi State, who is under the radar really good. They have 1 ACC loss so far. It was this past Saturday to Duke at home, 89-62. I actually had a chance to watch them. That was the first full game. I just wanted to see them ahead of playing the Tar Heels, so watch that game on Saturday. Their starting lineup, they've had 4 different lineups this season, but the last 9 games have all been the same, and that is Matt Cross, BJ Edwards, Kevin Boopy, my favorite name, Boopy Miller, Johan Traore, and another great name from Istanbul, Turkey is Samet Yagidiglu. And as you would guess, that's the 7'2" dude I referenced earlier. Matt Cross, 6'7" forward. This is his 4th school in his 5th year. He's been at Miami, Louisville, UMass, and now SMU. 10.7 points a game, 6 rebounds for SMU. BJ Edwards at 6'3" guard. He started at Tennessee. This is his 2nd year at SMU. 9.6 points a game, 3.8 boards, 3.4 assists, and 2.2 steals. So he's kind of a stat stuffing guy. Got to watch out for BJ Edwards. Boopy Miller, he is like RJ sized and does RJ things. He's their leading scorer. He's been this is his 3rd school in 4 years, was at Central Michigan for a couple, was at Wake last year. That's why his name might sound a little familiar. Now at SMU, he is the Mustangs leading scorer at 15.8 points a game, 5.9 assists against 2.6 turnovers, 3.2 boards, and shooting 31% from 3. So not great there, but 82.8% from free throws. So again, very, very similar to what RJ is doing for the Tar Heels. Their 4-man, Johan Traore, a 6'10" forward from France. So again, Carolina's going to have some size they got to deal with. Right now, that's like Drake Powell dealing with that. Unless they go my lineup, and then that would be like Ian Jackson or Seth Trimble dealing with it. But then they'd have to deal, it goes both ways. Anyway, Traore started at Auburn, was at UC Santa Barbara last year, now at SMU. 8.7 points, 4.8 rebounds. And then Yagidiglu, the 7'2" freshman from Turkey, 9.8 points, 6.6 rebounds, averaging a block and just over an assist a game. He does not shoot 3, so you don't have to worry about him stepping out. Just got to keep him out of the paint for goodness sakes and off the glass. We'll get to that in a second. 4 other players for SMU are averaging double-digit minutes. That's Chuck Harris, who was actually the 2nd leading scorer on this team at 11.4, Cario Akendo, Keon Ambrose Hilton, and Jarrell Colbert. So those are kind of the 9 guys to watch for from SMU. Very quickly, let's run through the 4 corners preview because there's some really critical stuff to know that's going to decide this game. First off, number 1, this is the top 2 offenses in the ACC in terms of scoring points per game. SMU is number 1 at 85.4. They're 19th overall. That's number 1 in the ACC. They have 7 different players averaging more than 8 points a game. So you don't know where it's going to come from on any given night. That's difficult to plan for. Carolina just about a point shy of SMU, 84.6 a game. That's 23rd nationally and second in the ACC. Obviously, the Tar Heels a little more top heavy in their scoring with RJ, Ian, and Seth leading the way. So yeah, there's going to be points, but the reason I bring this up, talking about these two high-profile offenses, is ultimately it's going to come down to who can get stops. Remember, Carolina is much more highly rated in terms of defensive efficiency, but SMU is allowing fewer points per game, 72.1 to Carolina's 79.2, which is next to last in the ACC. So yes, there's going to be points scored. I'm watching for which defense can operate more capably. Number 2 to watch for, and this one could be painful for the Tar Heels. You ready? Buckle up. SMU is an elite offensive rebounding team. Oh no, here we go again. It's Florida all over again. They're 23rd in the nation with 13.9 offensive rebounds per game. In fact, they're 23rd in the nation also in total rebounds per game. And if you go tempo free, they're even better with offensive rebounds, 39.4% offensive rebounding percentage, which is 9th nationally. That is just shy of where Florida is. But both of these metrics, offensive rebounds per game and offensive rebound percentage, are tops in the ACC. And I don't have to remind you that offensive rebounding was the death sentence against Florida a couple weeks ago, as Carolina just simply couldn't corral defensive rebounds down the stretch. That is critical in this game, keeping these Mustangs off the offensive glass. So watch for that. Number 3, three-point shooting could play a very critical role in this game. Carolina, as you know, is not shooting well, 31.4% as a team, 288th nationally. Quite frankly, if RJ Davis was shooting better from 3, this would be a completely different conversation. In fact, this whole season would be completely different if we're being quite honest with ourselves. But 2 of Carolina's highest volume three-point shooters are 38% or higher, but one of those 2 is Seth Trimble. And so Ian Jackson is your only high volume, high percentage three-point shooter right now. And of course, you know, the highest volume shooter on the team by far is RJ, who's sitting at 26.8% right now. So Carolina, 31.4% from 3 as a team, 288 nationally. SMU, on the other hand, 33rd nationally at 38% as a team. So Carolina is going to have to run them off the line, other than Boopy Miller, who, again, I said is very similar to RJ right now, 31.4% from 3 for him. 4th and finally in our 4 corners preview for this game, the free throw line is going to be wildly critical in this game. Let me tell you why. Both teams are almost identical in getting to the line. Carolina, 24.3 free throw attempts a game, 26th nationally. SMU, just slightly better, 25.1 free throw attempts per game, 20th nationally. So both teams are top 26 nationally in free throw attempts per game. Both teams are top 25 nationally in free throw makes a game. The difference is that Carolina converts at 74.7%. That's 90th nationally, while SMU is just 72.7% as a team. That's 140th nationally. Against Duke on Saturday, remember, said I watched that whole game. They got to the free throw line 25 times, but only made 11 of them. That's not going to do it, right? We'll take that, obviously. So, which is similar to, while these offenses are great, which defense can be better? We've talked recently about Carolina having struggles defending without fouling lately. 5 straight teams to the free throw line 20 or more times a game. And the last 2 games have been really difficult because of Seth's absence, with Chucky Hepburn taking, I think, 20 by himself. And then Burton for Notre Dame, I think, getting there 10 times by himself. If Seth's playing in this game, that changes in a major way. But free throw line, along with three-point shooting, offensive rebounding, are going to be very critical in this game. So there's 4 key things to watch from our 4 corners preview. Prediction for me: Carolina wins this game, but I don't see them covering that 7.5 point spread. That's too rich. So give me Tar Heels to win outright, but SMU to cover against the spread. What are you going with? How do you see this playing out? I mean, it's going to be a big, high-scoring game. Like, I would go Carolina 85, SMU 80, with RJ hitting a couple crucial free throws to seal it. How about that? Yeah, I love that. All right, gang, we'll be back together tonight after the game with our live postcast reaction. It's going to be late, but I'll be up, and I hope you will be as well. Come join us. Win or lose, we'll either celebrate or have a therapy session. If you haven't subscribed to Locked On Tar Heels on YouTube, make sure you do so you don't miss a second, including getting notified when I go live tonight. We're trying to get to 10,000 YouTube subscribers in 3 years. We're so close, and we need you to help us get there by the end of February. Go ahead, do it right now. Subscribe. YouTube. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Thank you so much. If you haven't joined the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community, we'd love to have you there. Free to join. The link is in the show notes. And the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders, where you get direct access to just me and other perks like all of my stats and charts and data. Just $5 a month to join that after 2 weeks of a free trial. A great way to help support the show and allow me to keep doing this for you all. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Can't wait for this game tonight. Please let Seth Trimble get back. Again, let's hear your lineups. Can't wait to see it. We'll talk again tonight. But until then, peace.